Hey everybody, it's Lonnie with Gateway Classic Mustang Gateway Performance Suspension. We have been doing 3 links for trucks for a few years now. We've just expanded, so we actually have 4 available kits now. We'll be covering from 53 all the way to 79. Right now we're currently only doing the short beds, but we're hoping to extend that into the long beds as well. This kit that we're going to put on today is going to be on a 54 Ford truck. The other kits are extremely similar. There may be some parts that are a little bit different, but if you're watching this video and you're installing one of our kits, it's going to be basically the same thing, just a little bit different bracketry and things like that. We kind of laid some stuff out here. We'll take a look at that and then we'll get started. Okay guys, I know it's like man code not to use directions, but we give you a pretty nice set of directions. They're colored, color pictures, all the measurements, bolt sizes, torque sizes. This is very important when you're putting your kit together. We recommend the very first thing you do when you get your kit is open this up, read through it completely, make sure you got your head wrapped around it before you ever turn a nut or bolt on your truck. I'm telling you, it will save you time. Second thing we like to do is sort our nuts and bolts out. If you look at when you're looking at the directions, you'll notice that we give you lengths. We tell you what the thread pitch is. We tell you if it's a nylock. We tell you if it gets a flat washer. Some of them are fine thread. Some of them get lock washers only. There are spacer kits. We've actually taken the time to lay our spacers out with the according bolt so that we don't have to try to figure all that out as we're going through. We've basically just set all of our hardware up with the spacers and the washers and everything. This way you also get a good inventory to make sure that you're not missing anything. We've pre-assembled a few parts over here, like our watch link pivot. You can see we've kind of already pre-assembled this. We've got spacers on both sides. When you get the bag with the spacers, it basically tells you what the spacers go to and that there's one per side. There's actually a spacer here on this bolt as well, and you'll kind of see all this a little more clearly, but this will not be pre-assembled. We did it just to kind of speed things along here as we're making the video. So anyway, lay all your parts out, make sure you have everything. So what's going to come in the kit is you're going to get all these brackets, you're going to get a pair of shocks, you're going to get all the hardware, the directions, you're going to get a pair of axle shafts, you're going to get an axle housing, the torque arm, and the torque arm pivot with the spacers, the rod end, and a little extension piece for the torque arm. You should also get a gasket for your third member. And then this should come with the third member as well. These are the T-bolts to bolt the axles in. Depending on what brake kit you have, you may use the backing plates, but you got the seals that go on the tubes, all the nuts and the copper washers to put your third member in. Keep in mind the third member is not going to come with a kit. It is optional. If you want to order a new third member, we can also supply you that, but that is not part of the kit. So if you read through the directions, you'll find the first thing we recommend is to pull the bed off the truck. It's going to be a whole lot easier, and there's some hardware that goes in from the top that there's no way you can physically get it in with the box still mounted to the truck. So you'll see here we've already taken our bed off, and we've already cleaned the frame off. Pretty clear in the directions what parts you need to take off, but it's all marked. It's highlighted what rivets you're going to drill out, all that kind of good stuff. So basically at this point we're just going to get to putting the new parts on and show you kind of how that goes. So the first new installation is going to be the spring hangers. This goes where your original spring hanger was. This is going to be your new lower control arm. Which will look like this. And you'll also notice there are a couple holes on the bottom here. These holes are going to come relatively close to your factory holes. Your factory holes are going to be small, so we're going to drill those out to a 1/2 inch to accommodate all the 1/2 inch hardware that we supply. Some of the holes we've found they're not always in the same location from Ford, so some of them may end up being oblong or something like that. It's not an issue, but the best thing that we found is basically put this in place on the frame, drill through these holes into the frame to enlarge your other holes, and then you're also going to drill from the bottom up to create these 2 new holes. How you guys doing? So Lonnie from Gateway Mustang, Gateway Performance Suspension. Today we have in the shop a 1954 F100. We are getting ready to do a 3-link installation on this, so that's going to cover 53 to 56. As you can see, we've already taken the leaf springs and the rear end assembly out of the truck. We've removed the bed. So at this point, we're going to go in, we're going to eliminate the rivets here, get the front spring hanger bracket out of the way. We've already removed the bump stop, which is your center line for your axle. We're going to remove the rear bracket, which are these 2 rivets, and then there's a couple more on the bottom. Then this stock shock cross member, you can see where the shocks were mounted from the factory. It's got a rivet top and bottom. We're going to eliminate those as well. This cross member is going to come out, and then your new Watts Link cross member will replace that one. So that's what we're about to do. Okay, so we've got our front leaf spring hanger removed, drilled the rivets out. Our cross member right here, which was our shock mount, we've drilled those rivets out, got that piece out, knocked off our rear spring hanger. So at this point, we're basically getting ready to, we're going to drill all of our rivet holes out to 1/2 inch. That's the bolt size of all the hardware that's going to go back to reattach this stuff. So we're just going to open those holes up to 1/2 inch. We like to use a step bit. It gives you a nice round hole. Really doesn't catch and bind and make your hole oblong. So that's what we're going to do next and get ready to start putting brackets on. Okay, so we're getting ready to put our lower control arm bracket on. You'll notice here that there's a factory cross member. We've already drilled the rivets out that held our original spring hanger on, but we're also going to have to grind the heads off of these 2 rivets right here. We're not going to knock them out, we're just going to grind them flat, because once we put this in place, you'll see there are going to be a couple of holes here you're going to drill. They'll be inside of those 2 holes, and then that will bolt that bracket back together, and we won't even need to worry about the rivets. So just grind those off flat so that this goes up and sits flat against the frame. All right, so you can see that we've already removed our factory spring hanger. We're going to put our new lower control arm mount on. What we've learned over the years of messing with these trucks, Ford didn't always put all this stuff in exactly the same place. So it may be off a little bit, but basically you're going to want to hold this up, line your holes up as closely as you can, and then with a 1/2 inch drill bit, you want to enlarge those holes, those factory holes, to accept the new hardware. We've already done this step, so we're going to move on to actually bolting this thing on. And again, if you read the directions, it tells you exactly what bolt, what washers, what nuts, all that stuff's in the directions. So again, guys, read your directions, do them step by step, and you'll be very successful installing this kit. Okay, something that's specific to the 53 to 56 kits. The bolt pattern was really tight on the factory leaf spring hanger, and the bottom bolts are really close to the bottom. And then we drill these holes up here to kind of give this bracket a little more rigidity than the factory brackets. So leave your lower 2 bolts out of the face of the frame rail. Put the button head bolts in from in here first. And we'll go ahead and snug these two bolts up. Don't get them really tight, but get them snug. Then we can put the remaining bolts in and tighten the whole bracket up. Okay, so we've got the bottom ones in and got them snugged up. We've put our lower ones in, got our nuts on there. I'm going to snug all these up, and then we're going to go back and hit everything with a torque wrench. Okay, so the next step is the Watts link mount. This becomes a rear cross member. You're going to remove the rear cross member from the truck and drill these holes out to 1/2 inch. There's a couple things you need to be aware of. If you look at this, you can see that this tube is angled. It's not completely flat. The degree of the angle changes over a couple of the different years. And then the 73 to 79 is a little bit different bracket as well, but it basically bolts in the same. Not too hard to figure out. So what we're doing here is the frame is angled. So when we put it in the vehicle, this is basically going to be plumb to the ground, and this will be at an angle. So you want the tilt of the angle to be backward. Also, you'll notice that the Watts link mounting block is basically flush on the front side, and it's a little bit recessed on the back side. So you want the angle to be away from your rear end housing and the pillar block to be closest to your rear end housing. So basically, to put this in, you kind of want to come in here at an angle, stick one end in, twist the other one, and then get it lined up with your holes. The 53 to 54, you actually have to, the rivet holes that you drill out of the factory cross member are not in the correct place for these holes. So there's measurements in the directions that tell you where to mount that. All the other years, the rivet hole on the top is what you're going to enlarge, and then the front rivet hole on the bottom you will enlarge to 1/2 inch, and then it's going to line up for you. So we're going to get that in and drop our bolts down. All right, so we're not going to tighten these bolts for the cross member just yet. We're going to install our corner braces. You'll have 2 of them, one for the left, one for the right. They look like this. You can see one side is longer than the other. The long side goes to the chassis. Again, this will show you in the directions. And you're going to put 2 of these bolts through. You always want to put from the front to the back anytime you possibly can. On a vehicle, you want to put bolts from the front to the rear. That way, if something should happen, you should lose a nut for some reason, technically G-forces should keep the bolt in place rather than it vibrating out. So this goes right up here in the frame. Put your bolts through, put the washers and nuts on the back side. This time we're just going to snug these, and then we're going to snug the ones that go through the corner braces. After that, we're going to actually use the corner brace as a template, drill through the holes, which will end up creating these 2 holes here. And that's what we're going to start off with our rear shock mount, our rear upper shock mount. We'll base it off of those, and again, we'll drill through the shock mount itself to create the 2 front holes as well as the top hole. So you don't have to do any math or any figuring to place these brackets. We're basically just using the brackets as templates. Okay, so now that we have our corner bracket in and it's snugged up, we haven't torqued it yet, we've just snugged it. You're going to take your 1/2 inch drill bit, actually use the bracket for your template, and drill through both the top and the bottom hole. And then that's going to create our rear bolt holes right here for our shock bracket. So when you grab the shock bracket, again, there are definite lefts and rights. The easiest way to tell is the bolt hole on the top is going to be toward the front of the truck. The frame is running at an angle, so when we set it on here, you'll notice that now the shock mount is plumb with the ground. So that's how you kind of tell lefts and rights. Also, you're going to have two different size bolts on this bracket. You're going to use the longer bolts toward the rear because you're not only going through this bracket, but you're also going through the frame and your inner bracket. So you're going to use the longer bolts on the rear. All right, now that I've got these rear bolts in, I want to snug this up again. I'm not going to torque it yet, but I'm going to snug that up. And then I'm going to go back with the drill and use my bracket as a template once again. I'm going to drill these two holes here and the top hole, and then put all my hardware in there. Once I've got that done, I'll repeat for the other side. Then all three of these pieces we can go through and torque.
Go.
Okay, so the next step is we have to figure out where we're going to mount the front cross member for the torque arm. Basically what you're going to do is take your tape measure on the step brackets. Basically these are on the driver's side. It holds your gas tank, but it also holds your running boards. So basically just to the rear of the truck, you're going to take the tape measure, bump it up against, you're basically on the opposite side of this right here, 16. You want to make a mark on the frame at 16 inches. That's going to become the center line of your tube. You can put a piece of tape up here, makes it a little bit easier to see, but basically mark 16 inches on your center line. You're going to do the exact same thing on the other side. Clamp your bracket into place, make sure the center of the tube is on that 16-inch mark, and then drill through the tube using it, or through the mount using that for a template, into the frame with a 1/2-inch hole, and then bolt it in place. Okay, so now that you have your holes drilled, we're going to go from the top down with our bolts. Get those in place. Repeat that for the other side, then you can go ahead and go straight to torquing this in place. Okay, so now we've got all the brackets installed, everything is torqued. It's time to start putting on the other parts. So in your directions, it's going to show you your watch link pivot needs to be assembled. Basically, you're going to get your watch link bars, get your bag with your spacers. You'll notice there is a spacer on either side of that rod end. When you're looking at your pivot, it's going to be tapered on this side, threaded on this side, so you're going to use your tapered bolt in there, seat it, put your half nut on, and then torque those. Then you'll put your bolt through this way. That becomes the actual pivot. It's in the bearing. You're going to use the spacer, and you'll notice it kind of sits inside of there, and then the jam nut. So we've already assembled this. We're going to go ahead and stick it into the bracket. So you'll notice that the bolt heads are facing the rear of the truck, the nuts are facing the front of the truck, the spacer is between the pivot and the bracket, and then the bolt goes from this side. Your jam nut will end up on the back side of that. You'll notice on this bracket we have 3 different mounting holes. This is basically an adjustment for side bite, essentially. The higher you put this, the looser your vehicle will be coming out of a corner. The lower you put it, the tighter it is. We typically tend to run it in the lower setting. It kind of makes the bar set more flat when you've got the low, like your lowest suspension ride height setting. But typically, like if you're going to do a road course or something along those lines where you're on a lot of speed coming out of a corner, you're probably going to want it down low. Let's say you're doing some autocross racing or something like that where you'd like to be able to actually get the back end to pivot, you would want to put it up higher. So you've got these 3 different positions that you can tune your suspension, tune how much side bite you have coming out of a corner with that. Okay, the next step is to assemble our torque arm pivot. You can see we've already done that here on ours. But basically, kind of the same thing as the Watts link. You're going to put 2 spacers on either side, put the tapered head bolt in the side that's tapered, put your half nut on it, lock that down, put your spacers on both sides here, then screw your heim into the extension here, and then that's pretty much that. The next thing we want to do is to locate our lower trailing arms. They look like this. You're going to see that one end has a knurling on it right here. We like to put that toward the front of the vehicle. This helps you get a handhold because these are left and right in heim joints. So once this is installed, you can just grab this bar and spin it to adjust your wheelbase. So it's just easier if that knurling is up at the front to give you a little better traction when you're trying to spin it. So also you want to grab all your hardware and your spacers. On the truck kits, we like to run the bars at a little bit of a diagonal angle just to give you a little more stability. So we want the long spacer to the outside. Come in with a bolt. It's easiest just to start that long spacer, get the bolt just barely sticking through. Again, knurled end toward the front of the truck, so it's going to hang here. Get your bolt started through there, grab the narrower spacer,